Welcome back, everybody, to Hill Dickinson Stadium one last time this season for another episode of the Everton Heritage Show. As always, brought to you by members of the official Everton FC Heritage Society. Today our opponents are Sunderland, and the significance of today being that Seamus Coleman has just announced the end of his playing career here at Everton after 17 years. The other significance of today is that the date that this fixture falls on would have been that of Bradley Lowry's 15th birthday. His family have been honoured today by being invited down as guests as both clubs continue to support the Bradley Lowry Foundation. My guest on the show today is what you could call our first away guest, as Sunderland's official club historian joins us on the sofa alongside Fran Hickey, who is a good friend and another member of the Everton FC Heritage Society. Rob has written many books. I think it's as many as 50 or 60 in conjunction with other players and former players as well as his own. He's been instrumental in the creation of many articles and the curation of Sunderland's matchday programme for many decades as well. And he had plenty of stories to tell us on the history of this fixture. Enjoy the show.
Marching down the Goodison Road.
One of Britain's greatest footballers.
Sharp, what a fantastic goal! And the Evertonians have gone berserk. Oh, yes, he's got it!
One Evertonian is worth 20 Liverpudlians.
Oh, it's great stuff by Everton.
This is football heritage.
Welcome back to the Everton Heritage Show, everybody. My name is Lewis Royden, and I am delighted to be joined on the sofa today by Rob Mason, who is Sunderland's official club historian and author, and Heritage Society member Fran Hickey. Thank you very much for joining us, lads.
You're welcome. Good to see you. Good to be here. Good to be here for my first visit to Hill Dickinson after many a visit to Goodison Park.
Ah, right, okay. I hadn't realised it was first. I thought you might have come down for the
I didn't come to the cup
game.
tie, no. My two sons live abroad in Vancouver and Gran Canaria, and they were with me at Christmas. It was the last day before they went, so I thought I need to spend some time with my sons. I don't see that much. Obviously, I watched the game, but I wasn't here for that game.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Fran, I know you weren't there either, because I was sat in your seat that day.
You were.
So I owe you a public thank you for the
You're welcome,
the
Lewis,
various
always.
occasions I've sat in your seat, which I will get round to in a minute, actually. Well, first impressions, I suppose you've been outside.
I've not been in yet. Travelled down with a couple of friends, journalistic friends who were there before at the cup game, and they were waxing lyrical about it. Thought it was excellent. I did an article about it before it opened, because amongst the things I do, other than for Sunderland, I do an annual for the Premier League.
Okay.
And so last year I was doing an article in a page called Goodbye Goodison, and another one, Hello Hill Dickinson. But that was just based on the time I had to write it. The stadium hadn't opened, but I was just finding out as much as I could about it, and it seems to be an absolutely fabulous stadium. I'm dead keen to see inside.
Yeah, it's. I think it's pretty special. What about yourself, Fran? Have you enjoyed it?
It's been great for me, I must admit. I haven't had to do quite so many late nights as others have done, but I think it's a fabulous stadium. Obviously, things are going to be led by on the pitch, but we've seen a little taste in the last few games of just how raucous, noisy and supportive the stadium can be when the team leads the way. So I'm looking forward to it being the beginning of a fantastic new era for us.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it as well. I mean, we often talk about back in 1892, thinking, the new Goodison being the first people in there and what it could become. I'd also like to get onto at some point this feeling of moving into a new stadium, because of course as Sunderland fans you've experienced it yourself. Can you tell us a bit about Roker Park?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you a little bit about that. In case I don't get the chance to say so later, let me take the opportunity to say, like most Sunderland supporters, I've got a really good impression of Everton. We have a lot of love for Everton, a lot of great history with the two clubs, obviously a lot of links between the two clubs, and we look at Everton as, if you like, for want of a better expression, a proper football club. We've had our great games against you, we've had our bad defeats against you, ups and downs of football, but right the way from the very, very early years, you've just mentioned the 1890s, right the way from that time, there's been such a rich history between the clubs. So always, it's a game I like to look out for when Sunderland play Everton, be it at Sunderland or at Merseyside. In terms of moving stadiums to a new ground, it's no longer new for us. It's 30 years next year since we moved to the Stadium of Light. So I had 30 years supporting Sunderland at Roker Park. and then I've had nearly 30 years now. It'll be 30 years in a year's time at the Stadium of Light. When we moved to the Stadium of Light, it was the biggest and undoubtedly the best football stadium built in England in the second half of the 20th century. The original capacity was 42,000. That was extended to 49 3 years later. The way the stadium was built in such a way that it could be easily extended. The maximum capacity is 66.
Wow.
If England had got the World Cup in 2006, the Stadium of Light was designated as a semi-final ground, and it would have been built. I mean, Goodison was a semi-final in 66, wasn't it? Yeah. When we had a quarter-final at Roker Park and 3 group games.
Yeah.
So the stadium can be extended quite easily.
It's cost £19 million. It has a capacity of 42,000. Hello and welcome to Sunderland Stadium of Light, the 12th new football arena to be built in the past decade, and by far the biggest. There's a night of celebration here to mark the official opening, culminating in a match between Ajax, 4 times the European champions, and Peter Reid's Sunderland. It's the start of what everyone here hopes will be an exciting chapter in the history of this famous North East club, which completed a short, nonetheless emotional.
Roker Park was Sunderland's home for the past 99 years. Opened in 1898, it hosted some magnificent matches and some huge crowds, particularly in the 1930s, when a record 75,000 turned up for an FA Cup tie against Derby. But 7 years ago, plans for a brand new ground were drawn up, and in the past 12 months, the site of Wearmouth Colliery has been transformed into the Stadium of Light. While just up the road, after an emotional farewell, the lights went out for the last time at Roker Park.
Rather like you with Goodison Park, and I know Goodison's still there for your women's team. Roker Park sadly was just demolished.
Yeah.
And like a lot of Sunderland supporters, I've got bits and pieces from Roker Park in my house.
Legally or?
Some legally, some bought at the auction, you know. Some bought at the auction, some taken out of a skip.
Yeah,
you know?
I've got a couple of Goodison seats at home.
But of course,
but we were allowed to buy them, so it's not quite the same.
My Roker Park seat, my clock stand seat was bought at auction.
I've got a piece of turf in my ex-garden. So
Yeah.
the house, unfortunately, a little bit of it. Moderately legally.
So's Derek Mountfield, actually. But he was telling me he picked his up on the day that he ran on the pitch when Latchford scored his 30th. So he's had his turf since the 70s.
Right, mine's a bit younger. Coventry, 98.
but we had the same issues that you're now discussing, like Fran's just said, the last few games, and I've read this and I've heard this. There's been a lot of talk about the atmosphere's been great, because the atmosphere at Goodison Park was always great. Everton supporters have always kicked up a good atmosphere. I remember seeing Everton play Aston Villa in the 1977 League Cup final replay at Hillsborough when I was a student in Sheffield. And I was in with the Villa supporters that night, and I never heard the Villa supporters. I like he was the Everton supporters at the other end. You know,
famous that one. Yeah, one of 3 replays. The game was played 3 times.
And I only saw the replay at Hillsborough. I didn't see the Wembley final or the subsequent one where Everton won.
I do think this is something that really I wanted to highlight in a way, and I'm glad that you brought it up, because of course, like, Sunderland Evertonians and Sunderland fans are so closely tied throughout history, and both have this reputation of being, as you said, proper football fans. But it goes all the way back to the start, doesn't it? I believe we shout about winning the first league title at Anfield back in 1891. But it was only a year later that Sunderland won their first.
So Sunderland were. When the league started, as you know, there were 12 founder members, and they were all in the Northwest or the Midlands. Sunderland were not allowed in because geographically we're out on a limb, as we still are. And Sunderland were the first team to come into the league after the first 12 founder members. We only got into the league for 2 reasons. One is we agreed to pay the travelling expenses of every other club to come to Sunderland.
Really?
And secondly, we'd already proved we were as good as anybody, because you'll know in the first year of the Football League, even now Preston like to call themselves the Invincibles. They won the league and the cup and they were never beaten. But they were beaten. They were beaten 4-1 at Sunderland that season. Right. Aston Villa, who were another great side at the time, came to Sunderland that season and were beaten 7-2. The chairman of Aston Villa and the founder of the Football League, his statue stands outside Villa Park, William McGregor. He described Sunderland as having a talented man in every position. And from that name came the nickname of the team of all the talents. So Sunderland, when we got into the league in 1890, in typical Sunderland fashion, we lost our first 2 games. We ditched the goalkeeper, who we'd had through previous pre-league years, and we signed Ted Doig, a famous man at the other side of Liverpool for playing for Liverpool after he left Sunderland, and buried in Anfield in the cemetery between Goodison and Anfield. But we signed him. We won our first game away to West Bromwich Albion, and were immediately docked the points and given a record fine because Doig hadn't been registered properly. Right? But we went without those 2 docked points. We'd have finished 5th in our first season, but we finished 7th. We won the league in the second season, won the league in the third season, second the following year to Villa, and then the year after that became champions again. So the first team to win the championship 3 times. And also in that year, it was the first, while the cup winners of Scotland and the cup winners of England had played before then, that was the first year that the league champions of Scotland and England met, and it was Hearts. Right. We met Hearts at Tynecastle, where they still play, and Sunderland won that game 5-3 to become proclaimed as the first world champions, having had because there was only Scotland and England playing football to any standard at that time.
Much
so
like
that was the
United
great
States world champions of basketball,
and world and baseball, as you say.
Yeah.
So exactly, but nonetheless, right from the very early days, from a Sunderland point of view, that put Sunderland very much on the map as a very successful club. And although we haven't had any success for 50 years. I mean, 53 years now. I was 15 when I watched Sunderland win the FA Cup at Wembley in '73. That's our only major trophy since the war.
Is it really?
It is our only major. We won the league in '36.
That's surprising because you've got quite a few league titles, haven't you?
We've got 6 league titles. So Everton, Liverpool, Manchester United, Manchester City, Arsenal and Villa are the 6 teams who've won the league more than us. And Man City, of course, have only just overtaken us, having won it recently. You know. But yes, I mean, when the war broke out, Sunderland had won the league more than anybody, other than Villa, who'd also won it 6 times. But Villa had been relegated in '36, as had Blackburn Rovers. They were the last 2 founder members to be relegated. That left Sunderland as the only team to have only ever played top-flight football, and we kept that record for another 2 decades till 1958. About 3 months after I was born, and then it all went downhill after that.
Well, mate, I was born in the early '90s, so I know how it feels about, you know, we won last one when I was 4 or 5 in the FA Cup. So, Fran, you're going to have to tell us what it's like to win a league title.
Exactly, it is fabulous. It is fabulous, and interestingly, the one I remember most was, first of all, in 1970, and that would have been our 7th, which took us ahead of Sunderland. So it is fabulous, and I'm planning to live a wee bit longer so I can see it again.
I think you're the Evertonians, you'll have to put me right on this, but I think the first game Everton played after they secured the title was at Roker Park, and I was there, and we were 1970.
70.
And I noticed when I came in.
We finished the season at Sunderland that year. We played Sheffield Wednesday, and then
you already had the league title sewn up. You played at Sunderland. We were en route to our 2nd ever relegation. We were relegated in '58, we were relegated in '70. It was our penultimate home game, and we were desperate for points. The game was a goalless draw, and the only thing I can remember about it was Howard Kendall hitting the post with a shot from about the edge of the box. Right. But we're thinking that's a really good point against the team who just won the league. And Joe Royle was up front, and a couple of months earlier I'd seen Joe Royle play at Roker Park for England under-23s against Scotland under-23s. It was my 12th birthday. The match was abandoned after an hour because of snow, but I remember Joe Royle, who was up front with Brian Kidd of Manchester United. The pair of them were absolutely just class. And I remember Scotland used to line up when it was a free kick for England on the edge of the box. The Scotland, I've never seen this before or since, when Scotland produced a wall, they didn't have 4 or 5 men in a row. They had a man, then a space, a man, then a space, a man, then a space, thinking nobody will get it through the gap. And every time Royal or Kidd hit the free kick, it went straight through the gap. Yeah. And then they thought, that's not a good idea. Learned the lessons of Hadrian's Wall and closed it up a bit after that. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, I mean, one thing that I certainly want to talk about today is some of these memorable games, because, of course, I mean, there's so many occasions throughout history where Everton have played Sunderland and it's ended up and being something very significant indeed. Do you guys have any, Fran, any memories of what stands out for yourself?
Well, my first FA Cup match in 1966, I'm looking at the programme there from the final against Sheffield Wednesday. That was the second game that I remember particularly well, and it was my first FA Cup game, 3rd round, Sunderland at home. And that's part of my affinity, if you like, with Sunderland. And, My dad had brought me up on the cup match in 1935, and that was the greatest cup game ever, possibly the greatest game ever, and Sunderland, the team to be respected, the club to be respected. And that was part of why he took me to that game. And so I've got that Sunderland connection there. But also 1977, I have to say, that was a particularly painful night for Sunderland, but it was good to be part of the occasion, if you like, in this Everton season had come to an end we were talking about the League Cup games, and we came to an end because we were also in the semi-final of the FA Cup that year and eliminated by Liverpool after the replay. And this was our last big game of the season, really. And what stuck in the memory so much was a massive away following, a proper massive away following. And they were going in all sorts of parts of the ground, quite happily, passionately, hoping to turn things round with brilliant vocal support. And I thought, these guys, they're quite like us, actually. If this was the other way around, we'd have thousands of people trying to climb on roofs and parachutes into the stadium almost to see the game. So although that was a painful night for you, it was a good evening to be part of. And whenever you speak with Sunderland supporters about it, there's a little bit of a twinge, and those who were physically present said, well, it was a great but painful night, but we don't blame Everton. There are lots of other factors going on there, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about FA Cup there, I think it's worth us bringing up the 1935 game, because it really is. It was dubbed one of the greatest FA Cup ties of all time. We have briefly mentioned it on a previous podcast. If anyone wants to see, that was the episode with Jamie Yates, and our Heritage member Joe Brennan wrote a programme article on it. 10 goals, 6-4. 6 goals for Everton, and none were scored by Dixie Dean, remarkably, it would seem. But
and none with headers either.
No headers either.
No headers either.
There you go. Tell us a little bit about that.
You asked me to bring some books down and written. This
please.
book I brought, which is called Match of My Life, does what it's probably an Everton one. It's part of a series. It does what it says on the tin. I spoke to 9 or 10 real Sunderland legends. About their match of their life, and then opened each chapter out to talk a bit more about their wider career. Now, Sunderland's all-time record goal scorer, Bobby Gurney, who'd scored in that 6-4 game. Bobby Gurney had been passed away for about a few years 15 years or so by the time I wrote this book. But I'd interviewed Bobby Gurney for the 1992 FA Cup final programme against your local rivals at Wembley, on the grounds that I did an article on him in the Cup final programme, on the grounds that Bobby Gurney had scored Sunderland's first ever goal at Wembley in the 37 final against Preston.
Here come the teams that have battled their way through those tense early rounds to be within 90 minutes of victory. It's a tense time for them, but they'll never forget this day. Sunderland are introduced to His Majesty by their captain, Horatio Carter. It's a few words of royal congratulation and then on to the game itself. The Preston fans are happy after the first half, no wonder. They've seen O'Donnell put them 1 goal up. The Wearsiders urge their side on, and how well they respond. The wily Burbank wins a corner on the right. Over it comes, and Carter nods it to Gurney, who heads it past Burns. 1-1, and everything to play for now. That's a goal that'll give them something to talk about in the shipyard. And there's more to come. Burbank's lovely pass finds Gurney, who moves it along for his captain, and it's Carter who slams that ball into the net. How's that, Your Majesty? What a game Burbank's having at Wembley. He spots a pass from Gallagher and chases through to make it 3-1, and proud Preston are humbled. The King won't have seen many better finals than this one. Everybody knows it's Sunderland's cup, but they forgot to tell Preston, who keep fighting every step of the way. Both sides have given everything, but the crowd won't let them stop until referee Rudd brings it to an end. It's all over, and the Sunderland side climb to the Royal Box, where Her Majesty will present the medals. It's Captain Rach Carter who's given the trophy so many teams have tried for. And there's a word from the Queen about Carter's recent marriage. Not a bad wedding present for Mrs. Carter. But now it's a chance for the Sunderland team to show their cheering followers the trophy. What a team. They won the league last year, and now the cup.
And Bobby Gurney's match of my life was the 6-4. When he said, as a pure game, he says, while we lost, he says, as a pure game of football, it was the best game of football I ever played. And he made the point as well that unbelievably there's 10 goals and not one of them was scored by the great Dixie Dean. But yeah, Bobby Gurney spoke to me quite extensively about that game in there. As I say, Bobby Gurney, England international, Sunderland's all-time record goal scorer, brilliant player in his own right. When he scored Sunderland's first goal at Wembley in 37, in 36 when Sunderland won the league, we conceded 74 goals and won the league. No team's ever won the league by conceding 74 goals, but we did score 109. And Bobby Gurney was one of 2 players in the team who scored 31 goals that season.
Wow.
So he was a really good centre forward himself. And I say a legend at Sunderland. And Bobby Gurney was not the most brilliant of brilliant players. He was one of those players, the never give in player. And he's the one that scores. Bobby Gurney was known for scoring impossible goals, and he's the man who scores the last minute goal to take the tie into extra time at 3-3 at Goodison, when he scores a goal apparently from a ridiculously narrow angle that nobody else would even dream it, but Bobby will have a go, and it went. But yeah, I mean, though we lost that game, it goes down in Sunderland as well as a great game against a great club, and
so you're still remembered back there, clearly,
yeah.
With the legends.
I mean, yes, absolutely.
Sunderland visited Everton for the replay of their 4th round cup tie, but the score after full time had been played was 3-3. Extra time was played in this extraordinary game, and this gave the victory to Everton by a margin of 6 goals to 4.
And then you talked about the 66 game in the FA Cup 3 years before that, when Everton were league champions. League champions 62, 63. You must have been,
right.
yeah. So 63, 64. Sunderland are in their first spell in the second division, and we have Everton at home in the 5th round and beat Everton as the league champions. Bear in mind we're a second division side, 3-1, I think it was. And then in the quarter final we draw Manchester United, who were the cup holders. We're 3-1 up at Old Trafford with 4 minutes to go. Our goalkeeper Jimmy Montgomery's concussed. United come back to 3-3. We bring them back to Roker Park. Manchester United equalise in the last minute, and then equalise in the last minute again of extra time to take to a secondary play where the wallop was. But that game at Roker Park, the 64 game against Manchester United, is what's commonly thought to be the biggest attendance ever at Roker. So officially, the biggest ever attendance at Roker Park was 75,118 against Derby in the FA Cup in the 8th of March 1933. Manchester United attendance was officially 46,000, but the gates at both ends were knocked down.
Right.
Estimates are between 80 and 100,000 that game. Sadly, 2 people died of heart attacks at the match. And the players at the time, apart from, with all due respect, they were obviously very unhappy when they heard that people had actually died. But what they were unhappy about at the night was the players at the time were all on a bonus of so much per 1,000 if the crowd was over 50,000. And there was probably nearly double 50,000, and they didn't get the bonus because only 46,000 had paid. So that was football in those days, when footballers weren't millionaires that counted to them, you know.
I mean, interestingly, there was well over 100,000 watched the 2 games at Everton and Sunderland. And you can tell the interest it generated was because you got a revenge victory on us, didn't you, 2 or 3 years later? 38, I think, and Bobby Gurney scored. Bobby Gurney scored the winning goal. That was 67,000 there. So there was a big Everton Sunderland cup match thing going on.
Well,
in that era.
For both Everton and certainly for Sunderland, I'm certain it would be the same for Everton. In those days, your cup ties would bring in monster crowds, absolutely monster crowds. And if it was 2 big clubs playing each other, well, doubly so.
Yeah, absolutely.
So a couple of matches that I'd picked out for discussion. I mean, it's funny how some are like great moments for us, some are great moments for Sunderland, some are awful moments for us. I mean, I'm thinking even of the recent one. January has the honour of being the worst set of penalties I've ever seen in any football game in my life.
Well, can I just say something on that? The worst penalty was the worst penalty was the one that you scored, because it was never a penalty in a million years in the last minute. You've forgotten that one because it doesn't suit you.
I'd forgotten it because I just see that as being the day we scored none of our penalties.
And from a Sunderland point of view, the referee this afternoon is the same referee that gave you that dodgy penalty, John Brooks.
No, he'll be balancing it out now. I'm sure you've spoken with him already. He'll have read your report.
We're making that point all the time.
We're stupid now.
Obviously, from the penalties point of view, our goalkeeper did well. None of them were great penalties, but their goalkeeper did well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just before you move on as well, something I should have said that you sort of cued me in on, and I didn't say. You talked about the 1977 game and said Sunderland supporters don't hold Everton. No, we absolutely don't hold Everton responsible. The man we hold responsible is the man I put on the cover of that book, which is a book I did called What If? The Alternative History of Sunderland Football Club. So Diego Maradona's on there, because Diego Maradona threatened to retire at age 17 if the Argentinian government wouldn't let him sign for Sunderland, but they wouldn't let him sign because at the time they wouldn't let players go abroad. Right. That's a different conversation for a different time, right?
This is definitely new to me. Where does this come from?
From the autobiography of Maradona's agent. Okay. Jimmy Hill's on there because of that Coventry shenanigans.
We'll get into that. Yeah, I definitely want you to tell me that
story.
on
there because he came to Sunderland hoping to be appointed as manager when he was manager at Dunfermline, before he came to Celtic, and Sunderland didn't appoint him. And Cloughey's on there. I mean, Cloughey's well known, of course, for his time as a manager, but should never be forgotten that nobody, including Dixie Dean or Gary Lineker, ever scored 250 league goals in as few games as Brian Clough. And Brian Clough did it for Middlesbrough and Sunderland, so that's why he's on the cover. And on the back is the Newcastle United legend Jackie Milburn, who was a schoolboy Sunderland supporter and played for Sunderland during the Second World War, but not many Newcastle fans know that, so I like to remind them.
You got to get the digs in, haven't you? Got to get them.
But a great, honestly, a great legend. And in my opinion, Newcastle United's finest ever player, and a great sportsman. You know, somebody at Sunderland that I'm sure you must have people at Liverpool who you think, look, it's the other side of the fence, but I recognise they were a great player and a great sportsman. At Sunderland, Jackie Milburn.
Not publicly.
Through
gritted teeth, maybe.
Jackie Milburn at Newcastle is the man in the northeast that Sunderland supporters would hold in the highest esteem. Yeah. For good reasons. Great player, great sportsman. Nothing wrong with that. He just happened to be a Newcastle player. You know?
Well, fair enough. I mean, I like to look back on in terms of my lifetime games that I've seen. I was there for the 7-1 back in 2007, I think.
So was that. I was there.
Were you there?
Let me tell you something about that as well from that game, from a Sunderland point of view. That was one of the games where, behind the scenes, we increased what was already a good amount of respect for Everton. Because, look, being a Sunderland supporter, I've seen us get beat plenty of times. I've seen us lose 8-0 at Southampton, when we scored 3 own goals, incling one from outside the box. That was, Sunderland being Sunderland.
I'll try and dig that.
Santiago Virginie. Santiago. It was when Gus Poyet was manager, so about 12, 13, 14-ish. Santiago Virginie whacks it in, volleys it from about the edge of the box.
Unfortunately, when I'm making these shows, I can't use any footage from the Premier League for copyright reasons. Before Premier League, I'm all right, and I'll slip it in. But maybe I'll find a still or something.
But anyway, when Everton walloped us 7-1 that particular day, one of the things was, the people at Everton behind the scenes, I'm hoping it's going to be the same this afternoon, in all of my visits to Goodison Park, the people at Everton behind the scenes, whoever they are, be they stewards, be they press people, anybody you come across, have always been absolutely good as gold. And on that day when we got beat 7-1, everybody afterwards, there was no patronising comments, which we've had at some other clubs when we've had a good hiding. There was no gloating. They kept their pleasure for when they were in private, when they were with us from Sunderland. They were just perfectly businesslike, perfectly decent, didn't make what was a bad day for us even worse. So you go home then and think, again, good club, good people.
They're all right.
We got hammered, We hammer people, sometimes we get hammered,
Well, exactly. I remember the Tim Cahill goal from that day. I mean, there's not many standout goals that I remember over the years, but
Tim Cahill always scored against us, not just for Everton.
His first touch that day was astonishing. He scored. If you go back and watch it, he put one ball from took around the defender.
He always scored. He always scored against Sunderland. Even the 2004 FA Cup semi-final against Millwall, we lost 1-0. Tim Cahill scored. Always, one of those players always scored against Sunderland.
Yeah, I'm a big Cahill fan. But we briefly touched on there the game of your relegation. In fact, do you know what? It's a bit of a coincidence. A fly buzzing around me there. There's a bit of a coincidence here because there was a Premier League game in '97. It was actually, as you'll well know, the final competitive game at Roker Park. What was Everton, and you beat us 3-0. But unfortunately, still got relegated that day. But was that? I mean, that's actually a 30.
We didn't get relegated that day. No, we got relegated the week after.
But that season. I apologise. Yeah.
So the game with Everton to 3-0. Alan Johnston scored the last goal. Chris Waddle scored the penultimate goal. Now, in fact, I interviewed Chris Waddle recently for this. We played Spurs at home, and I always do an interview with a former player who's played for both clubs. So Chris was my interviewee that day, and Chris was a childhood Sunderland supporter, big childhood Sunderland supporter.
I didn't know that.
And big Sunderland supporter. And he came to Sunderland towards the end of his career to finally play for Sunderland, who turned him down as a boy. And he hit a brilliant free kick at the full end. And when I said, if it wasn't for Johnson getting the tap in, you'd have gone down as Roker Park's last ever goal scorer. He said, I know, he was really wanted that place in history. But you said about Sunderland getting relegated, the week after, we actually lost to Wimbledon at Crystal Palace when Wimbledon were ground sharing at Selhurst Park.
Right, okay.
But on that same day, we finished after losing 1-0 at Crystal Palace. And guess what? We were waiting for Coventry score. Coventry were away to Spurs, and Coventry had managed to delay the kick-off again. Just like they did in 1977.
Right, this was the connection I wanted to
make.
No
love lost between Sunderland and Coventry,
trust me. There's going to be people out
me.
there that are going, again? What on earth do you mean?
Yeah.
So, this is a 30th anniversary-ish, or thereabouts, 30 years prior, 1977. Everton are playing Sunderland at Goodison Park. Meanwhile, Coventry City playing Bristol City.
Yeah. Okay, let me give you the story.
Explain.
So earlier that season, Sunderland had just been promoted. We'd won the cup in '73. We then were sitting ducks for everybody to try and beat us. Didn't get promoted for 3 years. Won the second division championship in '76, having won 19 and drawn 2 and lost none of our home games. And got promoted under Bob Stoker. Bob Stoker resigns quite early on in the following season. He suffers a lot from migraine. Team aren't doing well. And at one point, we go 10 games. This is typical Sunderland. The Sunderland town motto, by the way, is nil desperandum. It means trust in God, have faith, never say die kind of attitude.
Yeah.
But Sunderland being Sunderland,
we both have nil in our mottos.
Indeed, that's why I mentioned it. So, Sunderland being Sunderland, that season we go 10 games without scoring a goal.
There you go.
Right? And we are the deadest of dead men come Christmas. We've already got a young player who's a good friend of mine, sadly died last December, Gary Rowell, a young player already in the team. One of only 3 people to score 100 goals for Sunderland since the war.
Right.
The other being Len Shackleton and Kevin Phillips. And then at Christmas in an FA Cup replay with Wrexham, we bring in 2 young lads called Sean Elliott and Kevin Arnott. The 3 of them, Rowell, Arnott and Elliott, became known as Charlie's Angels. You remember the TV programme Charlie's Angels? That was broadcast in Britain for the first time a month before the debuts of Elliott and Arnott, and all 3 of them were discovered by the legendary Sunderland scout Charlie Ferguson. So those were all known as Charlie's Angels. Second half of the season, Sunderland's form is better than just about anybody. So after not scoring for 10 games, we beat Bristol City 1-0 on a Friday night. Next game, we beat Middlesbrough 4-0. Next game, we beat West Brom 6-1. Next game, we beat West Ham 6-0. You get the picture.
Yeah.
The team who couldn't hit a barn door now can't stop scoring.
Yeah.
We go on this wonderful run. We get to the penultimate game of the season, which is on the Saturday at Norwich. We're 2-0 down with 7 minutes to go. If you think there was a lot of Sunderland supporters at Everton, you should have been at Carrow Road, right, which was a Saturday.
Yeah.
We get 2 goals the last 7 minutes, we get a point. We come to Goodison Park, it's all down to the only way we can go down is if we lose and Coventry and Bristol City draw. Coventry win, Bristol City go down, Bristol City win, Coventry go down. Yeah?
Exactly.
Now, I can't remember the details of this, I looked it up for that book, but there's about 150, 160 miles between Roker Park and Goodison Park. You've just mentioned how many Sunderland supporters were there that night. Everton's crowd that night was 36,000, something the previous home game I think had been 23, the one before that was 20.
Exactly right.
Everton had now to play for, they were Sunderland supporters.
Yeah.
Bristol to Coventry is less than half the distance. Tragedy, they have to delay the kick-off for the Bristol City. And Bristol City, we all know, have got a fabulous away support, not compared to Sunderland and Everton have it, right?
Yeah.
Hill...
Yeah, I was about to say, gets the blame for this, doesn't he?
Gets the blame, so he should.
Yeah.
Gets the game delayed. And I know he got the game delayed, or made arrangements to get the game delayed a few days before. Friend of mine, sadly no longer with us, a man called Lance Hardy, who was a chief producer at the BBC. not from Sunderland, but a big Sunderland supporter, because as a 6-year-old, he fell in love with football in Sunderland because he watched the first game he ever watched was the 1973 Cup final. Nice. Went on to be the head man on BBC TV for several World Cups, etc., etc. Edited Match of the Day, the works. All right. I was chatting to Lance one day, and he said, "Yeah," he says, "I had a conversation once with Tony Gubber." You remember Tony Gubber from BBC?
Yeah.
About the famous Germany-Austria game in, I think, the 1982 World Cup that was fixed, so they both drew and both went through.
Yeah.
And he says, as a result of that, talking to Tony Gubber, he says, Tony Gubber explained to me that the week before the Coventry-Bristol City game and the Sunderland-Everton game, Hill had said to Gubber, "I need to get away to get this game delayed." Officially, they say it was the police, and that was the police getting the game delayed.
Yeah.
Sunderland had a chance to take the lead with a shot by Kerr, but it was blocked and Holden, following up, couldn't get to it. But 2 goals by Everton, 1 in each half, sunk Sunderland, and indeed the score could have been even worse.
Sunderland lost 2-0 at Everton that night. You might remember the last goal was in the last minute when we hit on the break as we were looking for an equaliser.
Yeah, Latchford got the first, and then it was a last-minute Rioch goal for 2-0.
On the break. But we were right in the game at the last minute. Bearing in mind, Bristol City's manager was Jimmy Hill's old assistant manager at Coventry.
Right, okay.
Far be it from me to possibly consider they might have colluded. I'm sure they didn't. I'm sure it was all full of sporting integrity, the same as we've got with Southampton and Middlesbrough, possibly.
Absolutely.
Right? But the game gets... So, Coventry are 2-0 up. Bristol City come back to 2-2. According to my good friend, the official Coventry City historian, Jim Brown, there was only one team going to win that game, and it wasn't Coventry. Right? Jimmy Hill gets the score brought through from Goodison Park, gets it put up on the scoreboard. The coach goes to the pitch and tells the players to ease off. Now, the Coventry City captain and the Bristol City captain, ex-Leeds United teammates who played against Sunderland in the 1973 Cup final, Hunter and Yorith.
Yeah.
Right? They'd played under Don Revie, former Sunderland centre-forward, I might add. They'd played under Don Revie, well known for how he would fix and fiddle games. Right? Read Peter Lorimer's autobiography. And they're just basically down tools and pass the ball to each other for the last. Yeah. It's disputed as to whether it was 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or 15 minutes. Jim Brown, my very good friend from Coventry, tells me it was 5 minutes. 2 friends of mine who were Sunderland supporters who were at Coventry that night because they were at university in that area, both tell me it was about 12 to 15 minutes they played kicking about.
But 29 unbroken seasons in the top flight have seen plenty of hairy moments. In 1977, Coventry City and Bristol City squared up for the final relegation decider.
Just 7 minutes into the second half and a defensive blunder by City lets Hutchinson in again. Awful moments for City now. 2-0 down, a result that would send them straight back to the second division. But the Bristol side were fighters, and almost immediately Donny Gill is there, headed down, and Jerry Gow sweeps it home. What a time to score his only goal of the season.
And news of Sunderland's defeat at Everton was flashed onto the scoreboard by Jimmy Hill. The 2 sides played out a tame draw.
Sunderland, you see, had lost, and that meant the 2-2 draw made Coventry and City safe with minutes to go.
We let Coventry have the ball, we let them keep it in their own half, and they just knocked it about. And I can always remember someone shouting to Mick Ferguson, I think he was playing up front for them. I think they shouted to him, "Oi, stay in your own half, you're not allowed in here."
Fans went wild. City had pulled off a Houdini act. They'd drawn with Manchester United, they'd beaten Leeds and Liverpool, and now they'd come back from 2-0 down against an equally desperate side. City and Coventry embraced as they came off. After all, they were sharing survival. It was the relief of men who'd really escaped from a footballing Alcatraz.
Coventry and Bristol City stayed up. Sunderland went down. I say the night later after we beat Everton 3-0 at Roker Park, the same afternoon, Coventry, who were away to Tottenham. Tottenham are managed by the former Coventry player Jerry Francis, who decides he's going to play reserve goalkeeper. Coventry never having been to London before, get caught in the London traffic, the game gets delayed, and again.
Sorry, this is back in 90. This is 97 now. This is
the history repeating itself.
That's the 2 times it's happened.
Yeah.
So
how convenient.
Hey, look. For a few years, I worked for Coventry. Right. In recent years, I wrote some of their programme, and I have to say the people at Coventry now are absolutely top draw, spot on. But we are going back to 1977. Yeah. But we were fiddled. And I once, just to finish off, you put me on my soapbox, I apologise.
I know, no, I've allowed it. It's
but
pulled the string.
I once got the chance to interview Jimmy Hill, and it was a game. Sunderland were playing Tottenham in the FA Cup about 1994, and it was a match of the day live thing, and all the match of the day crew were there, and I collared them all to do little interviews for the Sunderland programme. But my real reason was I wanted to get a Jimmy Hill.
Yeah,
and I asked Jimmy Hill. I asked Jimmy Hill about I asked him a few nice questions about the game that day and the match of the day production, and he was very forthcoming and very charming and lovely. And the moment I then raised the subject of the Coventry 77 debacle, he suddenly decided he had a train to catch and must go immediately. So as an investigative reporter, I was a complete and utter dismal failure, but he just did a run at the moment I changed the subject.
Hey, but you tried.
I tried.
At least you tried.
I tried. And just, this is the last point, right? On the day that Fulham unveiled a statue to Johnny Haynes, the great England player, the first £100 a week footballer, we, by coincidence, happened to be playing at Craven Cottage. And before the game, they announced a whole load of Fulham legends who came across the pitch. And again, it was a routine league game, but of course there was a big Sunderland following. And every Fulham legend that got invited out was warmly applauded by the Sunderland supporters. They had nothing. And then they said the words Jimmy Hill. And the place went in uproar. And the police were thinking, what's going on? The rest of the press was saying to us being the Sunderland people, what's going on? And we had to explain to them that Jimmy Hill would...
Persona non grata.
Oh, absolutely. That's a nice way of putting it. Without the expletives. And it just absolutely took off. And of course, Jimmy Hill being Jimmy Hill was sort of arrogantly waving at all the Sunderland fans and winding them up, which didn't help to settle the situation, put it that way.
No,
so let's just say, to finish this bit, there's a love between Sunderland and Everton, a mutual respect between Sunderland and Everton. Obviously, we want to win today, but there's a mutual respect between Sunderland and Everton and Sunderland and most clubs. Not with Coventry.
Bravo. I could tell that was... I'll admit, Fran had prepped me for that, and he said, ask him about that.
And who was your manager at the time? Who was your manager in 77?
Who was our manager in 77?
Ex-Newcastle manager.
Oh, was it?
Having taken over effectively from Billy Bingham.
Ex-Sunderland, yeah.
I mean, my mum's favourite player, Billy Bingham.
Oh, is he?
Yeah,
I was musing on the journey down, thinking, what would it have been like for Bingham still to have been our manager at the end of the season?
That's a really good point,
it had come to that.
Oh, Fran, I wish I'd known you told me that before I wrote that chapter in that book. I would have put that in. Billy, because just to give you another little anecdote from the other side of Stanley Park, in 1980, we were threatened. We won at Anfield last day of the season. Goal scored by a player called Stan Cummins, who now lives in Kansas.
Excellent.
Actually, I interviewed Stan just about 3 or 4 days ago on the phone from Kansas, funnily enough. But as it turned out, even if we'd lost that game, we would have stayed up because other results went our way.
Yeah.
But Liverpool's manager was Bob Paisley from Sunderland, Hetton, part of Sunderland. Big Sunderland supporter, and Bob had put champagne in the Sunderland dressing room before the game. So it works both ways, to be fair. Liverpool, in fairness, did have a big European Cup final to play, and it was the deal was don't kick lumps off them. But nonetheless, if Billy Bingham had been there, we might have been all right.
You might have been all right.
I'm happy to get on to Billy Bingham.
Unfortunately, he struggled a bit. He had a brilliant moment about 2 years previous to that, where we were in pole position to win the league in 75. And then just drifted the last few games, too many draws, we lost momentum and finished up coming third, in actual fact, when basically we had one hand on the trophy, it felt like at the time.
That Billy Bingham having been there early this season you've really knocked me with that one.
Right.
That's a good point. That's a good point, yeah.
I'm writing another article on it.
Well, yeah.
Certainly in terms of
next time I talk about
another
that,
what if.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was wondering if you'd remembered as well, just another point to that great story that you tell there is that apparently, or so I've heard, I wasn't there, the tannoy at Goodison at the end of the game announced
Highfield Park.
No. So going back to the 77 story,
it was all confusion.
We've won 2-0.
Yes.
The Sunderland fans are waiting to hear what's happened over at Coventry before you know of all this horror show. And the Tannoy announced that Coventry had won the game before having to correct himself.
Right. It was worked both ways, because at Coventry they announced the score, and then, bear in mind I said earlier, Everton scored in the last minute. At Coventry, after all this had gone on, the guy came on the Tannoy at Coventry and said, score correction from Goodison Park, and they all went white, thinking God, Sunderland's equalised. And then it was Everton 2. But yes, it was announced that Goodison, that Coventry won. Now I knew it wasn't, because back in those days, Fran will remember this, Radio 5 didn't exist, the football was on Radio 2. And I had a little transistor in, and I was hearing, didn't know any of the shenanigans, I just knew the score, but I knew Coventry Bristol was 2-2, and I knew we were down. But most of the Sunderland supporters around were celebrating.
They celebrated, that's what I was curious about, really.
And in those situations also, I think there's a little bit, you hear what you want to hear anyway. I mean, the announcer, there was confusion. There was confusion, Billy Butler at the time. But sometimes you just hear what you want to hear, because we had this when we were chasing Liverpool in 86 to win the league, and there were probably Liverpool supporters with trannies in the stadium who were leaping, and everyone there assumed it was Liverpool had conceded, but they hadn't, they'd scored. But anyway, that's a completely different topic.
It happens, doesn't it? The murmurs go around.
But most Evertonians
reaching the end of the season here now. You know, there's our final home game at Hill Dickinson, and you know that there's going to be. We play Spurs on the final day, so you know there's going to be murmurs going around the stadium about what's happening at West Ham. So obviously we've been a part of it ourselves recently with the I don't want to talk about it. The Bournemouth game and all that.
Left
it's just
behind
nice to be
a little
looking
bit.
up, isn't
Exactly.
it? We're talking about Europe, you know, is an outside chance, but I'm delighted by that. I'm conscious of time. I know you've got to get over to Hill Dickinson shortly for your BBC responsibilities. But you mentioned Billy Bingham there. Should we move on to a few shared players, perhaps? Because
absolutely.
I mean, like I say, I mean, in my era, there's absolutely tons of Premier League players that we've shared. But of course, it goes all the way back. I think I counted. I see what I've got in my notes there. I think it was something like 47 players, 47 men's players that we've shared.
I haven't written them all down, but I also looked last night.
Them now, don't worry.
And I came up with 48, but let's not argue over one.
48, fair enough.
Is it a transfer going on that you know about, we don't?
No. Man, probably I just can't count, Fran. I don't know. I'm a man of words, not numbers.
Well, we've got, obviously, you mentioned Billy Bingham there, Warney Cresswell, Nick Buckley. Paul Bracewell is one that I wanted to mention, because we did also kind of skip over the 1985 4-1. That's one game that I'd really like to talk about. Were you there, Fran?
I was there,
I mean, that's regarded as one of our greatest games of all time, isn't it? You know?
It was. I would say that in that season, us beating Man United 5-0 earlier in the season was a massive statement victory for us, where we really realised, having beaten Liverpool at Anfield the week before, that this team was actually developing into something. Okay, but later in the season, with the Americans would say the clutch end of the season, this Sunderland at home game, 6th of April it was in the middle of 10 of the most fabulous days to support Everton. Because we had narrowly beaten Southampton 2-0 away, a very hard fought game, then beaten Spurs away on Wednesday the 3rd, because that was our big rivals, and then we had Sunderland at home on the 6th, shortly after you've had the League Cup final disappointment, and you started very well. But we were looking at this team thinking, well, we know you can play, you know you're absolutely excellent, you're having victories left, right and centre, but can you keep it up game after game after game? One eye on Bayern Munich away the following Wednesday. And when you guys scored first, there was a sort of feeling of anxiety and nervousness.
It was an early one, wasn't it? 2 minutes in
2 minutes,
as well.
2 minutes.
Yeah.
Just for a second. So our goal was scored by Ian Wallace, who'd played for Coventry in that Coventry Bristol City game.
Right. And when that early goal happened, I thought, maybe one, because we're bound to lose one of these games. Something's going to go wrong in one of these. Maybe it was going to be it. But all it did was inspired Everton, particularly led by Peter Reid, Andy Gray, and the incomparable Paul Bracewell, who came to us from Sunderland, the last piece in that team's jigsaw. And we did play brilliantly, as you said, and absolutely ripped Sunderland that day.
Some of the notes that I've made on that day was that, I mean, that was actually... That win took us to 19 games unbeaten. The run began with our win at Sunderland
away at Christmas.
That Christmas. Sunderland could have gone 2-0 up. There was an offside goal as well.
A tight offside
goal. So there was, twitchy nerves there. But I always hear the stories of Andy Gray in that game. I mentioned Paul Bracewell briefly because he was Sunderland's player of the season, wasn't he, in '84?
Yeah.
As you've just mentioned, we signed Bracewell. He was, like, as you say, the piece of the puzzle that made everything work.
Yeah, exactly.
He's there's that famous pass across the pitch that he makes. Was it Sheedy's goal, I believe?
Trevor Stevens' goal.
Sorry. But aside from that, it's Andy Gray, isn't it? Andy Gray absolutely threw himself at everything. And of course, I'm only watching the footage of this, looking back at it, and even the post-match interview, he's got a black eye.
Exactly.
He's been throwing himself at everything.
Everyone would agree. Andy Gray was an excellent technical footballer, but no one was as brave as Andy Gray when it came to putting his head. Maybe Mick Lyons back in the day, but it was exceptional how he could turn a situation where nothing was happening into a chance or a goal just by going that extra 10% and putting his head in where it hurts. And he had a lot to do for both those header goals, particularly the second one.
The second one's brilliant. I mean, the famous one's the diving header from Reed's
John
cross,
Motton's,
isn't it? He's horizontal on the floor. But
Reed's cross is great.
Yeah, exactly. Back when commentators seemed excited when we scored, they all seem disappointed these days. But I think the second header's even better. It was a magnificent goal.
Yeah.
And like I say, again, Peter Reed, another connection there.
In midfield, Paul Bracewell faces the club whose supporters voted him their player of the year last season. Indeed, on the Saturday of Easter weekend last April, Bracewell helped Sunderland beat Everton and then to escape relegation. And Sunderland look to be facing that annual dogfight again. They've been badly hit by injuries. Walker with the throw to Berry. Back to Walker. Curled in. Wallace was there! Oh, what a start! Well, the travelling fans from the northeast couldn't have wished for a better start. And it's the first goal that Everton have let in the league here at Goodison Park since New Year's Day. And here comes Stevens. And sharp Gray. And Elliott half away. How did they survive that? Bracewell. Low in. And Gray's there. No. Derek Mountfield's header, and look at the break with Wallace. He's got Walker on the far side, but he's offside. Much to the relief of Everton, who would have gone 2 down there, but for the flag. So, Stevens, lobbed forward for Gray. He's so brave, and he's absolutely flat out. Everton are appealing to the referee, Sheedy. And Gray again, and this time he's crashed it against the outside of the goal and then collided with the boards. Bracewell, on again for Reed. Well played. Reed's cross, Gray! What a fantastic goal! Beautiful goal. 34 minutes gone, and Everton produce one right out of the textbook. Bracewell fed Reed on the right, and Reed's approach work there was sheer class. The cross that came in was low and inviting, and Andy Gray is the person to throw himself at those and score with a diving header. And here's Bracewell. Goes back again to Stephen. Gray's there again! Oh, I say! Another great header. Just 4 minutes after his first one, Andy Gray produces another goal which sends Goodison Park into rapturous applause and appreciation coming from all round the ground. Trevor Stephen got the ball back in with that lovely cross, but surely that is vintage Gray, just as the first one was. You don't have to jump 6 feet in the air to score goals with your head. Gray will go for them at any height. Stephen away from Pickering. Yes! Marvellous goal again by Everton. And this is now becoming one of their best performances. A marvellous move that was when you look back on it. The ball which Bracewell produced from left to right would have done justice to any grade of football, international level or whatever. And so too would the skill and the purpose and the sheer power in the shot of Trevor Stephen. And they're in trouble, Sunderland. Gray to Sheedy. Off the defender and in. Gordon Chisholm. The fourth was Everton's 100th of the season in all competitions, and indeed they are now unbeaten in all competitions in 19 matches. No wonder the Goodison faithful applaud them off the pitch.
Perhaps we should thank Sunderland too and Ian Wallace for that explosive start which provoked Everton into an exceptional performance. And the reception given to Andy Gray was well merited.
I get the biggest thrill in the world out of seeing that ball hit the back of the net. I've had it since I was 14 or 15. I've still got it at 29 and I hope I've still got it at 39. I started my career, if anyone had told me that when I was 29 I would have every domestic honour, then I'd have been well pleased with that. And I've got a chance. I'm going to do everything in my power to make that come true and give the Goodison supporters the league championship.
Let me tell you a bit about that game from a Sunderland point of view.
Yeah, please.
So
yeah.
I travelled down today with the man who played centre half that day.
Oh, really?
Right, and I didn't bring up the subject. This is Gary Bennett, who was our former captain, and in the nearly 150-year history of Sunderland Football Club, there's only 4 people played more games for Sunderland than Gary Bennett, right? And I didn't bring up the subject of this game at all, but over a cup of coffee at the service station on the way down, Benno was reminiscing about games at Everton. He was reminiscing about that game.
Wow.
And how good Andy Gray was and how good Everton were. And he said, we did the worst thing we possibly could have done that day. We scored and took the lead and annoyed them, you know.
Yeah.
And Sunderland at that time were not unusual. We were struggling. We were relegated that season. We'd been in the League Cup final with Norwich. Sunderland being Sunderland, we lose 1-0, we miss a penalty and have to score an own goal. You know, typical Sunderland. Both Norwich and Sunderland go down. But the club was in absolute turmoil. A very good friend of mine was our manager of the time, Len Ashurst, who's our record outfield appearance maker. Jimmy Montgomery's our record appearance maker. The goalkeeper was 627. Len made 458 appearances. He's our record outfield appearance maker, and he was our manager at the time. You know, when I say I worked with Len on his autobiography, Left Back in Time, I've got to say, because this sounds like I'm blowing my own trumpet, but I'm not, because Len, I didn't write a single word of it. Len was unusual for a football autobiography, because Len wrote it all himself.
Right.
All I did was I took out the bits that would have got him sued. Right. I've got the unexpurgated version on my laptop, right? But Len was our manager at that time, and the club was in total turmoil with boardroom squabbles, lots of squabbles with the players. We were in an absolute state, so we came to Goodison Park as a basket case of a team, and then hit Everton, who were the best team in Europe at the time, probably, who, as you say, really, you know,
and
did brilliantly.
I think that goal conceded by us, I'm sure, from the John Motson commentary I listened to last night, it might have been our first league goal conceded since about January or something like that. And what demonstrated, the reaction demonstrated the mentality of that team. They were cracking footballers, no doubt about it. But the mentality was they took anything like that as an affront.
Well, that's what Benno was saying. We did the worst thing we could have done. We scored.
Yeah.
And you're talking there about Brace and Reedy. Now, I know Brace and Reedy well. I mean, I wrote Reedy's column for him the 6-7 years he was Sunderland manager. Still speak to Peter from time to time. Brace, I used to write his captain's column. Brace has been at Sunderland about 5-6 times. He came to Sunderland 3 times as a player.
Okay.
And then he's been back as like sort of coach, first team coach, academy coach and stuff. And in fact, earlier this season I was bumping into Brace all the time until you may know, you probably do know, you're very knowledgeable lads. He's just become assistant manager to another former Sunderland player, Jermaine Defoe. The pair of them have taken over at Woking.
Yeah. Was he really?
Right, yeah.
I didn't know
so
that.
So Brace has joined, because Jermaine and Brace were together working at Tottenham.
Right, yeah.
But anyway, Brace, cracking fella, as you say, a brilliant footballer, absolutely brilliant footballer, a metronome of a player. in terms of just I mean, he was brilliant in his era. In this era, the way they play football now, Brace would be in such high demand.
Absolutely.
Because teams that want to keep the ball, Brace was the man for keeping the ball.
Absolutely.
Reedy is my favourite all-time Sunderland manager. Had many great times with Peter going away on pre-season or whatever.
Is that from a personal perspective, rather than
personal point of view?
In terms of successes, I guess.
Well, look, Reedy was our
got
manager.
Promoted, didn't
Reedy
he?
got us promoted twice. So Reedy came in 94-95, 7 games left, to save us from relegation to the 3rd division. Right?
Yeah.
Saves us from relegation with a game to spare. Bear in mind, we've just missed relegation. Following season, wins the league. We get promoted. He hasn't got a lot of money to spend because it's the year we're leaving Roker Park to go to the Stadium of Light. He has big money to spend on 2 players, the goalkeeper Tony Court and the centre forward Niall Quinn. Both get season-ending injuries after about 4 or 5 weeks. We go down with 40 points. Following season, the Stadium of Light opens. We have a bad start. We then do really well. We get 90-something points and finish 3rd. Lose the playoff final to Charlton after a 4-4 draw, scoring our first 6 penalties. And then losing 7-6 on penalties. Most teams after that would crumble.
Yeah.
Not with Reedy, not with Niall Quinn and company. We go back, we get a record. Nobody had ever got 105 points by then. We get 105 points the following season under Peter. And then we're a newly promoted side. We finish 7th in back-to-back seasons of the Premier League. Both seasons we tail off a little bit. Actually, both seasons we tail off a little bit because by January, February, we've been 2nd, 3rd or 4th. Nearly all the season, first half of the season. So they were great days under Peter Reid. Quinny up front, super Kevin Phillips, who got the Golden Boot as Europe's top scorer. First in the team, first season out of promotion, 30-0 Premier League goals.
Yeah.
You know, great team.
Yeah, I don't remember an Everton player scoring 30 Premier League goals.
Great
I don't know
team.
if we've done it yet, have we?
You'll remember,
closest.
Sadly, one or two of the lads who sang this song are now passed away, but some friends of mine recorded the Cheer Up Peter Reid song under the name Simply Red and White.
Okay,
got
I
to
don't
number
know that one. I'll dig that out for sure.
Yeah, Simply Red and White. Cheer Up Peter Reid. It got to number 41 in the chart, so just missed out being on top. Just missed out being on top of the pops, which incidentally in those days had the guest producer as an old school friend of mine and a big Sunderland supporter. He was itching to get it on, right? But the lines include, "We once thought of you as a Scouser dressed in blue. Now we know you're Sunderland through and through," you know? Now, obviously, Reedy does have a deep love for Everton, and you'd have to say your love for the team you played for is always bigger than the team you manage.
Of course.
But if you speak to Peter Reid about Sunderland, he'll wax as lyrical as I am about how much he enjoys his time at Sunderland. And I loved Reedy. I still do love Reedy.
Yeah.
He's absolutely great fella.
Came fourth in the Wales Player of the Year, behind Maradona and a couple of fellas of that ilk.
Mind he was chasing Maradona the day that Maradona scored the goal, doesn't he?
Right.
Which he doesn't like to be reminded of, so cut that bit out in case he watches it.
I have got an interview with Reedy where he does. Sorry, not an interview. He's doing a talk, and I'd filmed it, and he tells this story about how he blames every single other player in the team.
Absolutely, they should have taken him out.
But of course, he only tells these stories once he's had a few drinks.
There was quite right too. I agree with that.
There was another Sunderland manager chasing Maradona that day. That was Terry Butcher, who also manages. He was one of the other people trying to keep up with Diego Maradona.
There you go.
Now, he just missed out on Top of the Pops. Did you get on Wogan with that song, your mates?
Don't
because the whole of our squad got on Wogan, which is probably a higher accolade, to be honest.
Probably.
Here we go. And the second musical link, if you like, is we, of course, acknowledge Jordan Pickford's Mackem background in our favourite song for him.
Go on.
So, I couldn't possibly sing it now. I think you'll hear it.
You will
hear
absolutely
it now.
hear it this afternoon without a shadow of a doubt. But there's a nice line about him hating Newcastle and them lot over the road as well.
Well, Well, I mean, Jordan obviously was great for Sunderland. I remember Big Sam Allardyce gave him his debut. But a good while before that, when Steve Bruce was manager, we went on pre-season tour to Germany, and I remember Jordan, who was a very young lad, coming with us. I remember watching a training session just with the goalkeepers, and I was stood next to Brucey and his assistant Eric Black, and they were just so astonished at how good Jordan was at that age, and thought he was England material then. And he was 2 years or so off his Sunderland debut. But yeah, brilliant goalkeeper. But Sunderland have got a tradition of great goalkeepers.
And so have we. That's another thing
L.R. Roos, you mentioned before we started.
Jimmy Montgomery.
I'm glad that we're getting onto that, really. I mean,
but no, we acknowledge that Pickford is a Mackham and he's a Blue.
Yeah, well,
and he's a toffee through and through.
Jordan's, I mean, he is Sunderland daft. He still turns up at Sunderland quite often to watch games.
Yeah, for sure. His son was, I think it was the return leg, whether it was at the Stadium of Light this season. His son was I think it was his son anyway. I might be getting that wrong. Was the mascot, walked out with him, half blue,
that's right,
exactly,
half black, red and white shirt. So, I'm glad that he still has those. He's still proud of where he comes from, and he's still, because you see some players, they just lose their affinity.
No,
it's painful to see that.
Jordan obviously has a deep affinity now, having played for Everton for so many years.
9 years now, I think it is.
Sunderland's the club he obviously grew up supporting and still does support.
Yeah, and of course England's number one.
I meant to say, have you seen the Jim Montgomery? Because Jim Montgomery was Sunderland's keeper for my first FA Cup game in '66. And I didn't actually realise he was that old, but he made the most stupendous double save against Leeds in Sunderland's Cup win in '73, and it's very reminiscent of Pickford's double save against Chelsea that plays such a big part in keeping us up. It's not
getting across the goal.
Very similar.
Monty, who's a very good friend of mine, the save you're talking about was voted as Wembley's greatest ever save when Wembley was knocked down.
Right.
And but I have to tell you, that save's famous for Jimmy because it was in the FA Cup final. Jimmy used to make saves as good as that week in, week out.
Right.
When we got the Cup in '73, third round away to Notts County, who were a third division side at that time, we're losing 1-0. 10 minutes from time, Monty makes an even better save than he does in the Cup final. Then we equalise.
Right.
Otherwise, the Cup run would never have happened. That was Jimmy. But Jimmy would have coached Jordan at some times, not officially, but Jimmy would go in from time to time. And if, have worked.
You've got to say, Jordan's highlight reel now is getting ridiculous.
It's astonishing. I've talked about him at length in the past. I mean, I was really fortunate to have Alan Kelly on the show as well, who was of course Jordan's goalkeeper coach, and we talked at length about him, and I made the point then, to which everybody agreed, that it's every game now. Every game, more or less, he makes a save that you think he had no right to get to that.
Exactly.
So when you talk about a highlight reel, how many games has he played? Over 400, 450. There's 450 clips.
I regularly have discussions with people about the most important position in the team, and I always say the most important position of the team is the goalkeeper. I've written many books, 50, 60, 70 books, and the first one I ever did was on every goalkeeper ever to play for Sunderland. That came out some years before Jordan Pickford was playing. But I think the goalkeeper is your most, because without a goalkeeper you've got nothing, in my opinion. I know people say centre forward, but I think goalkeeper is the most important.
Can we bring that onto Lee Roos then? Because as we mentioned, in terms of shared players, I was delighted to see that you've written about Lee Roos in one of your books. I was fortunate enough to make a documentary on Roos last year with my dad actually, and it was a full 40-minute thing, and we really went into his story because this man is absolutely phenomenal. He's no longer a household name, but I think he really should be.
Indeed.
And every story that we were finding is one thing after another. I mean, getting lost in France, going to war, and earning medals for bravery, running towards flamethrowers and all that kind of thing. But even that compares to his football days where he's swinging from crossbars and having cups of tea with the people behind the goal. There was one game where he made a mistake, and the following match he went and shook the hand of everybody in the crowd behind the goal before they kicked off by way of apologies and stuff like that. But I mean you must have some stories in Lee Roos.
Evidently, a great figure in the history of football, not just in the history of any particular club, be that Everton, Sunderland or anybody else he played for.
Was it Arsenal, Stoke? Went all over, didn't he?
Well, he basically bankrupted Stoke, didn't he? Because he always played as an amateur, but he put in such heavy expenses to Stoke that he basically did for the club.
He would hire trains. He hired trains to go up and down just for himself. I've got to get to the match. Hire a whole train for himself to get to London. So it's on the club.
In the days. I mean, these days, footballers often make the front pages as well as the back pages. Lee Roos was probably the first footballer to make the front page as well as the back pages for some of the scandals he was involved in. I think my favourite one is the night he was found in bed with two particular women who'd come first and second in the beauty contest he'd just judged. But yeah, that was Lee Roos. He was very much the so we have in modern day football, we have the posh and Becks, if you like. But back in Lee Roos's time, one of his girlfriends was Mary Lloyd, who at the time was the biggest of all the big music hall stars at the time. Yeah. And as we mentioned earlier, before we started recording, I think he was taught by H.G. Wells. There's just so many stories about Lee Richmond Roos. He played 99 times for Sunderland. He broke his arm in a game against Newcastle on his 99th and last appearance.
Right.
But he was also our goalkeeper in a game that does manage to stay in Sunderland's history, which was from December 1908, and the score in a year when Newcastle United were league champions, the score was Newcastle United 1, Sunderland 9. Wow. Now that stayed as a record away win in England until a few years ago when Leicester City beat Southampton 9-0 at Southampton. Jody Vardy scored a last minute penalty. In fairness, for the purposes of accuracy, in the 50s Wolves did win 9-1 at Cardiff, but last time I looked, Cardiff was not in England, so I've always insisted that was Sunderland's record.
They would certainly agree with
that level of precision counts. Definitely.
For sure.
When it comes to a record.
Yeah, for sure.
One of the most enigmatic, charismatic and iconic footballers ever to pull on a goalkeeper's jersey. He was the most illegible bachelor of the time, a bit like Beckham of his day, dapper suits, all that sort of thing. No one had seen the like of him. This was the time when you'd have the strikers, one going in to take out the goalkeeper and the other one to put the ball in the net. Now, Roos was unusual because he gave as good as he got. He would quite often take the ball up to the halfway line. Now, in those days, the goalkeepers were able to handle it right up to the halfway line. So you had to bounce it, but that's how he would start an attack. Not all goalkeepers took advantage of that, but he did. And people would go along just to see him. He was such an amazing guy. During the game, he'd be chatting to the crowd behind the goal, telling jokes, all that sort of thing. He was even known to swing on the crossbar. The First World War began on the 4th of August 1914. Not long afterwards, Lee Roos signed on for the Royal Army Medical Corps. The Germans mounted a counter-attack and they were using a flamethrower. Private Lee Roos, who had never visited the trenches before, was in the sap when the Flammenwerfer attack began. He managed to get back along the trench, and although he choked with fumes and with his clothes burnt, refused to go to the dressing station. He continued to throw bombs until his arm gave out, and then, joining the covering party, used his rifle with great effect. And for this he was awarded the Military Medal, an astonishing achievement, and he was also promoted to Lance Corporal. Gordon Hawke, an amateur England international, witnessed Roos running across no man's land at full pelt towards the enemy, firing his rifle as he went.
So yeah, for the go and watch the film. It's on our Patreon account and our YouTube account. You'll be able to find that. And for the Sunderland fans, I hope we've got some Sunderland fans watching. Which book of yours was Roos in?
Roos
Do we have it
is
with
in this. Well, I've written about Lee Richmond Roos lots of times in magazines, but in that one,
the
called Sunderland the Cult Heroes, I featured people such as Kevin Arnott, who I mentioned earlier in that discussion that we had about the Charlie's Angels, and more modern day people like sort of Julio Arca and Nyron Nosworthy. Nyron Nosworthy, incidentally, is at the match this afternoon. He's going to be in behind the goal with the Sunderland fans.
Brilliant.
This afternoon, Nugsy, one and all. But I'd featured Lee Roos in the Sunderland Cult Heroes book to show that cult heroes aren't just a modern phenomenon.
Brilliant. All right, I'd just like to round off tonight with a bit more of a slightly more somber note, but one of absolute positivity. And of course, today would have marked the 15th birthday of young Bradley Lowry, whose story really resonated throughout football, didn't it? He was an absolute hero of a kid and really brought together these two clubs, if not football as a whole, I think. I mean, raising awareness of children living with cancer and suffering, and off the back of that, Everton was not necessarily surprisingly a club to help donate to the cause, but more so than any other club that Sunderland came up against in 100%.
That time. Everton were the best, definitely.
Yeah, and there's some really beautiful moments between the two clubs and with Bradley involved, and I mean, inevitably, you know, we've all seen the footage, but could you just tell us a little bit about that story and how Everton are involved?
So
and
at the
what's led to
time,
today?
at the time when the family first wrote into the football club at Sunderland to talk about this child, you'll appreciate it'll be the same at Everton, it'll be the same at Sunderland, it'll be the same at every football club, regardless of what league you're in. People will write in when they've got something that's sad in the family and hope the football club can do something. They might just want a signed shirt or something to help, or some acknowledgement. At Sunderland, we took that on. The media department took that on. They read the letter. They thought, this boy's needs whatever help we can give him. I think it was I think I'm right in saying it was a lad called Andrew Lisco, who was at the football club at the time, who really sort of pushed that initially. And then, of course, the football club got very involved with Bradley. And then other football clubs got involved with what was going on with Bradley. You all know that there was a big bond, a genuine bond, between Bradley and Sunderland's star player of the time, Jermaine Defoe. And Jermaine really, really genuinely took to Bradley.
Yeah. He
And then,
was
of course,
his best mate, wasn't he?
Absolutely.
You know? Yeah, it was fantastic
nice lad,
stuff,
Jermaine.
yeah.
And then Everton came on board, and Everton took it to another level, in that this was not the club that Bradley supported. This was another club and another community that recognised that, you know, as they say, cancer has no colours.
Yeah.
And look, I would imagine, I've only just met you 3 people today, but I can tell a proper football supporter when I meet one, you know. And I know, as I said earlier, Everton's a proper club. Now, every club, including ours, has got its share of nuggets. But generally, most football supporters do not warrant the perception they have for people who are not football supporters, who see them all as crackerjacks.
Yeah.
You know? And so the Bradley Lowry story, in the way that Everton got behind that lad, shows, if you know, to use the cliche, shows the power of football. It brought people together. Now look, when I'm on my way home to Sunderland tonight, and you lads are all on your way home, depending on the result of the game, we'll all be either chuffed or disappointed, whatever. But ultimately, football is, after all, a game.
Yeah.
You know, and there are some things that matter a lot more. And a young boy, a young girl with cancer matters a lot more than who wins this afternoon.
Yeah.
You know? And I thought Everton, combining with Sunderland and combining with football altogether, really showed that. Sadly, Bradley is no longer with us, but his spirit lives on. And the work the Bradley Lowry Foundation do, supported by Everton and Sunderland, continues to do great work for the children who find themselves in the same sort of position now that Bradley was in some time ago. So, you know, on behalf of Sunderland supporters speaking to an Everton community, obviously I need to say a big thank you and an ongoing thank you to Everton for all that they've done and continue to do, which is absolutely top draw.
Yeah, well said.
Well
said. Thank you very much. I think the family today, on behalf of the Bradley Lowry Foundation, are guests of Everton. They will be at the game and hopefully celebrate.
I presume you know there's somebody who's cycled from Sunderland to Everton today to raise money, and there's somebody else who's doing, I think it said it was 6 marathons over 6 days.
Wow.
A marathon a day, running from Sunderland to the match today.
Blimey.
You know, again for the same thing.
All for the for the same reason. Well, there you go. Like as you say, while some things are much bigger than football, I think, and you're obviously absolutely correct in saying that. It is nice that sport as a whole and football can be that vehicle and spread this around, because there's so many other children out there who are suffering from similar things, that whose names we won't know. You know, and I'm really glad that we've been able to spread that message and raise that positivity and raise that money.
It's about the stats, it's about the excitement, it's about the memories, but the incredible power the game has to be a force for good is barely being touched.
And I think it's fair to say as well that in Bradley's short life, the love he got from football was a big highlight in that lad's life.
Definitely.
So he didn't live for many years, but he lived some brilliant experiences.
What a special young man.
Well put.
And on that note, I think we'll leave you there. I know you've got places to be. I hope you enjoy your first time here at the Hill Dickinson Stadium.
Absolutely sure I will.
I'm saying that, and as I'm saying it, I'm realising I don't really mean it.
No.
I hope everybody treats you well, and I hope you go home miserable.
Likewise, mate. But I think, correct me if I'm wrong, bearing in mind it's my first visit here, I think you do still run out of Z cars, don't you?
Absolutely.
Which Sunderland always ran out of Z cars at Roker Park.
Did they really?
Of course.
See, we've missed out on so much Z
of course,
cars,
and of course, because
so many,
because of this Archibald Leach connection, and because of Z cars, Goodison Park was always one of my favourite away games. Always one of my favourite away games, despite some of the bad results you've talked about there. And yeah, Z cars at Sunderland is. I mean, we run out now to different music, but occasionally we do still run out of Z cars.
Yeah.
And we run out of Prokofiev's Romeo and Juliet, and that morphs into Republic singing Ready to Go just as the teams run out. But for decades we ran out to Z cars at Roker Park, and still occasionally, maybe it's particularly big games, or if there's some anniversary to do with Roker Park, we run out of Z cars still.
Brilliant.
Excellent.
Well, enjoy Z cars. Fran, I hope you definitely enjoy the game. I am determined to get in at some point today. This footage I have of you on the front row of the Gladys Street going absolutely bonkers. So if anyone's out there thinking, where do I know that face from?
It's from
all of the footage of Everton's great goals at Goodison in the Gladys Street end, and the camera pans to the crowd, and there you are going nuts.
And
do you ever get recognised for that?
I do occasionally get recognised by that.
I will. There you go. Kieran's shown us a photo.
Well done, Kieran. Thank you.
Yeah.
See my agent, Kieran.
I'll show you some more later. It's brilliant. The Crystal Palace one in particular. Anyway, we can talk about that all afternoon. But no, I really appreciate you both giving us your time. I know
thank you very much for inviting me.
Thanks
really
for setting it up, Liam.
All the best.
Thank you very much indeed. No, not at all.
Smooth, guys.
Smooth.
Three-way handshake.
All the best.
Cheers.
We'd like to say a huge congratulations to Rob, who in the days following this recording was presented with a Lifetime Achievement Award by Sunderland at their 2026 end of season award ceremony. Well done, Rob. Well deserved.
Thanks very much for watching, everybody, and thanks for supporting us throughout our first season here on the Everton Heritage Show. It really, really means the world to me. I really wanted to create something that was that would celebrate the history and heritage of the club, of course, as we go into this new era here in the Hill Dickinson Stadium. We don't want to leave Goodison behind, so it's really meant the world to me that everybody's got behind it and supported it. As for the housekeeping, as always, please go and check us out on Patreon. It is where everything can be found, including all of our heritage films over the last 3 years, all for free. You can go and get all of that on there. Paid subscribers can also get access to the audio podcasts of our Heritage Social nights recorded at Denby Castle. We have a few up already, and there will be plenty more coming over summer, so please keep an eye out for those. You can get us on Spotify. We are on Spotify. Every single episode of the Heritage Show is now on Spotify, so please go and follow us on there. Just search for Everton Heritage on all of your social media channels. And yeah, there's also Patreon exclusive, also free. Just log in through your Gmail account. You don't need an account. Log in through Gmail. I did a Seamus Coleman documentary a few years ago as he picked up the Dixie Dean Award. So on the night we displayed something, a little film that was made shortly before the club did their documentary on his career, and so I made it using all of his TV appearances, his interviews, footage of all of his goals, and it maps his career from Killybegs and Sligo Rovers over to Everton, his loan period in Blackpool. And then, as it was then, 15 years with Everton, obviously now 17, big montage with all of his goals, and it ends with his the award presentation where we had Dave Watson come over and present him with the prestigious Dixie Dean Award. So please go and check that out, patreon.com/the Everton Heritage Show. Everything can be found on our website, EFCHeritage Society.com. Feel free to get in touch. for anything. Drop us some comments, drop us some likes, subscribe everywhere. Just do us a favour. You've been supporting all this time. It's been brilliant. And it was really nice to have some really cool guys in today as well. I've wanted to get Fran in for a little while. He's a really lovely guy. And Rob too, for our first so-called away guest today. What a fountain of knowledge he is. I honestly could have talked to him for many more hours. So hopefully the opportunity will come again next season for many more of these fantastic conversations. I can't wait. We'll see you soon.
Heritage.